There we go. Good morning, everybody. I am here with Danny.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you.
Danny will be leading us in the journey today, which is really fun. And so I am I'm going to be completely honest, a little cloudy this morning. I am, but I love the topic that we're talking about today. We're continuing our conversation on spiritual buzzwords. So it is another one that we hear a lot, which is attachments, cords, and connectors. We say it in the invocations and the journeys and stuff a lot, but you hear it out there in the nomenclature. So that's the one that we will be talking about today. What are they? What is it? What's the topic? Also, different ways that Reiki heals it. And it wasn't actually planned way back when, but it's interesting because we were just talking about this in our next step classes as well. We go more in depth in it in those classes, and really where today what we do, or in these formats, what we do is we take you through a guided journey in order to help you, have the Reiki help you to release anything that might be attached. You might not have anything attached. But it will help with all of that. But in our next step classes, we just did this last week, and we learn actually how to do that for other people. That's in level 2. And we go really into depth with it, and we learn the skills and the techniques to do that, because that is something that we all do in our sessions. And it's a part of our practice and our session style. So we're going to talk about that. What are they, and the different kinds, and the techniques, and all of that. So there is that. And along those lines, I did want to tell this group here, and those that are listening later on YouTube, that we will actually be doing our free webinar on November. Let me just make sure I have the right date. Yeah, November 18th. It'll be in the time frame of the Distance Reiki Share, so it'll be 9:30, but it'll be longer. So 9:30 to I think we're going to do 12:30. We're going to do a lengthy webinar. We've tried it different lengths in the past and tried to do it shorter, things like that. And it always ends up that we go over the time, because there's always a lot of information for us to share. Maybe one of these days we'll get more concise, but at the same time, we do always like to provide lots of resources around that. So we'll be sending out information about how to register for that if you can't make that full time frame, because I know many of you join from work and listen. um, we will be sending out the recording for it. So if you register for it now, with that, it'll be a little bit of a different format. You will have to register for it, even if you're on our normal distance Reiki share list, and like kind of join, but we'll give you all of those directions. It's just like, putting in your name and email to make sure you either get the Zoom link or you get the recording if you can't join live. So both things are true. And we'll talk more about that as it gets closer also. And then last announcement, just a reminder that our Reiki merch line is live. So we've certainly appreciated those of you that have, um, already purchased. I did want to say one thing really quick. We decided to do a print on demand process with our Reiki merch line, so that we didn't have to carry a lot of the inventory. For us, it just feels a little more environmentally friendly this way, so that we didn't print a bunch of things that maybe, not everybody responded to, or something like that. So it does take a little longer to get to you than, our Amazon same day delivery. So it's going a little old school with that. So just a heads up with that. And then, for the holidays and things like that, we're going to be sending out information around that, but also gift certificates. So we'll be in touch with more about that. Okay. Um, so let's go ahead and get into today's topic, which are cords, connectors, attachments. And really, I would say that the most popular word that you hear around this and all of these kinds of things is the word attachments or spirit attachments. So you hear that a lot. It's actually in the Reiki manual, so you might have heard about that. Some teachers teach about it more than others. And you might have heard about it in sessions. So it's a pretty popular word. And that's a part of the reason that we wanted to explain what it means and that there's also different kinds of it. You'll hear it in ours. So when we do kind of our generalized like invocations, sometimes not generalized, sometimes, when there's like super channeled and it'll come in when we go to like the river of life as far as a journey is concerned. And the river of life is releasing cords, connectors, attachments, curses, oath, vows, all of those words. You might hear them in the invocations. Those are a part of what we're talking about with these subjects as well. So what are attachments? Attachments are energetic bonds that I think it's pretty said in the word, like defined in the word that they attach to us. They are not necessarily like a part of our energetic body. They're outside of us with it. And they can cause like limiting beliefs. They can cause stuck energy within us. We talked about that last week with the chakras. They can cause us to be stuck in our lives. They can even come down to like a shift in personality. Definitely seen that. Wants, desires, things like that as well. Um, so they can have a variety of symptoms, they can have a variety of effects on our life, and there are different types of those. And it might not be a part of your practice, these kinds of things, but because even if you are in Reiki energy or move into spiritual aspects, you're probably going to hear these words, which is why we want to talk about them. But you don't have to have this as a part of your practice. Also, with all of these spiritual buzzwords, I know that we're going to say this kind of over and over again, that you also don't need to know what any of this is or even have the desire to want to know what any of this is, but to know that Reiki energy takes care of all of these things. So even if there isn't any sort of indication that there's an attachment, but you're like, oh my gosh, what if there is this aspect of an attachment? Reiki energy does take care of it. However, if this shows up for you, or if this is a part of your practice and you just don't know what it is or want to know more about these things or your different techniques to be able to work with the releasing process of it, the curiosity can be there around it. So the different kinds of attachments. I would say the most common one that we hear about in spiritual spheres is spirit attachments. And so spirit attachments, like I said, aren't the only kind, but they are the ones that have like a level of consciousness. Um, and that level of consciousness, I think, creates it's a part of the reason to me of why it becomes the most popular one to talk about. There can be a variety of belief system as far as what can be attached to a person. And so with the consciousness aspect, you can even have kind of an interaction with them. They're low density, generally speaking. However, I've seen some that are a little bit of that higher density. Now, with the spirit attachments, There is a little bit of a process of learning and unlearning about them. You get to have your own perspectives around this. So, this is certainly not trying to make your perspective my perspective around it. Um, my perspective around it and my own experience around it is that the ones that have consciousness, generally speaking, aren't these super malevolent attachments. Most of the time, what I've seen as a practitioner is that they are happy to go home into the light, and they are actually might even be, I've seen it in my sessions where they attach to the person so that, and not necessarily for like a long period of time, because they know that as a practitioner, I am going to know how to release them into the light. And that is one of the things that is amazing about Reiki energy, is that with Reiki energy, we are not casting out these attachments. They are being moved into the light, where they are then returned to the light. This aspect of returning home to the light. Um, that is one of the things that I love about using Reiki energy for them, because not all techniques do that. And it's not a, again, as we always say with Reiki, it's not hierarchical. It's just why we personally like doing this work with Reiki is because it does that naturally. It's an enlightened energy. It does that naturally. It's a part of its frequencies. It's a part of what it does. Also, sometimes they can be even like an aspect of lost souls that are here, but the idea of them is that they have a level of consciousness, and that's what the I would say the biggest difference with the spirit attachment versus other forms of attachment are um are is the main difference with it. Um, and there's not we can't teach like as far as in depth about these concepts as we would like to, because we are on slightly a limited amount of time with it all. But I would say that that is kind of the broad idea of it, or the generalized idea of it. But there's a lot more to learning about spirit attachments. Um, through it all. So the other kind of attachment, another kind of an attachment is an intrusion. An intrusion does not have consciousness. And that's a big difference. If you've ever taken the Animal Reiki Masterclass from us or another teacher, we do talk about this in there. So you have some experience with it as well. And you might have it in your own practice also. Um, but intrusion doesn't have a consciousness to it. So it is a form of an attachment, but it is, one of the examples that we use commonly is like getting stabbed in the back. So what this is doing in this form of, let's say, even betrayal, right? It's causing this stuck energy that's attached to us. It's causing this, maybe it's a blockage. Maybe it's creating a limiting belief. Maybe it's, keeping us stuck in our life in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it ends up this kind of looping story or looping thought around it, or a phrase that doesn't feel maybe even like your own with it. Now, that can be a form of an intrusion. And sometimes it takes on, like, if you think about the idea of being stabbed in the back, like, what I've seen around that is that it is um in that kind of heart space with it, right? And a spirit attachment might look different because it has a consciousness. So that can look in all different ways as far as what that consciousness is, where it came from, and how it's going back to the light. With an intrusion, how I see that is it's just this kind of really dense energy that is really stuck there, almost like this dark cloud look. That intrusions and thought forms can kind of look similar to me in that way. And I talk about that because we've talked about um, thought forms in the past with it. And so that's kind of what it can look like uh, to me. And when I say look and see, this is proverbial, because as we've talked about our styles of intuition, I don't actually see it, just blank screen in front of me. It's like this knowing or these thoughts about what it looks like to me. Um, so it can create that aspect of our lives where we have a really hard time moving forward with something because of an intrusion. But it doesn't have a consciousness. Now, a good thing is that again, Reiki energy lifts this into the light. It can lift that aspect. What I've seen with intrusions when maybe they come from a form of like that betrayal, which can be um, a uh, a form of trauma, is that Reiki energy comes in and it brings in that light of forgiveness, which isn't to make what the other person did okay. What it can do is once that intrusion is lifted and it brings in that light of forgiveness, it helps us to move on from that. It helps it to not have power over us any longer, and helps us with that. So that is what the difference is between an attachment, a spirit attachment, and an intrusion. One has consciousness, the other does not have consciousness. The other forms of attachments that we might have, um, curses, oaths, vows, spells, promises. So you can find a lot of different versions of this in sessions, in ourselves. Oaths and vows are one of those things that we can, you know, uh, have from this lifetime, or we can have them from past lifetimes. A vow of silence, vow of poverty, those kinds of things can be a part of it. I laugh when I think of this because I always go to Gone with the Wind. Um, with it, like, to me, those words, I'll never I gosh, my brain is so foggy this morning, I apologize, but "I'll never go hungry again." Somebody in the chat is gonna know the quote. And, so, you can have those kinds, but in past lives, you can have those vows of poverty, those vows of silence. We see those in the healing arts. Again, um because we've been healers in past lives. That's part of the reason that we are called to this work is because we've been healers in past lives, and so you can see that in this work as well. We can have curses and spells, and that can be even a part of some people's practices. It's not a part of my practice, and that's not my preference. Now when we're talking about these things, we're not talking about spells that I know many people in Wiccan practice, where you are, using the elements of the earth to create benevolent manifestations in your practice, in your life. That's not kind of like what this is talking about. And you might have in your lineage, in your ancestral lineage, or in sometimes even in your area where you live, wherein it's a part of the culture there. This can be a part of that. Um, so that's another thing that can come through, and it can create this this attachment to us that creates some of those symptoms of attachments, not really being ourselves, or maybe there's a subject that we can't move on from, a level of healing that we can't move on from, or maybe there's something in our life that we want to manifest that it is really hard to manifest. And you can find those blockages that um, create this level of not having sovereignty in our body around it that is stopping us from moving into the places that we that we want to manifest in our life, right? So, an example of that might be like if we have a vow of poverty or a vow of silence in a past life, that we might have a hard time speaking our truth in our healing arts. Or, maybe our money manifestation isn't what we would want it to be. So all of those things can exist where something in this is creating a problem in this lifetime. Also, it can be in the familial line as well. So that's what those kinds of attachments are. So again, a stuck energy. Then we talk about energy cords also quite a lot. Cord cutting, that's another one that is very popular that you'll hear about in the spiritual modalities. And so those that idea of energy cords or cord cutting. Now, one of the cool things about what the way Reiki does cord healing in this is it actually does a different style of releasing cords and connectors. Um, and those cords and connectors can look so many different ways. It can be that channel of energy between people. That's a really big place where you find it. Um, so it can be a bit between people. That's really a really big place that we find it. Relationships, even between healthy relationships. Mother or parents and children is a place where you can find cords, even if it's a healthy relationship. That's a big place that you can find it. And, the cords and connectors, generally speaking, even if it's not like this really negative type cord, we still want to have that sovereignty um, within ourselves. And sometimes those cords can even make it in that level of an unhealthy codependent relationship. Um, when we're talking about parents and children, of course, we have the level of dependency that is a part of that, but um, you always want to make sure too that there isn't where it can kind of tip into that little bit of that unhealthy version where it's can drain from one person or the other. Um, and that's like Colleen and I have a very healthy relationship. And there's been times where we've needed to release a cord or connector here or there for different things. We found that with health challenges. Um, Sometimes one of us will pick up on what the other one has, right? And we had it wasn't too long ago where we had like, she had an eye problem, then I had an eye problem. And then I had something happen, and I forgot exactly what it was, but I had something happen, then it showed up in her life, in different ways. But it was like, oh, okay, there's a place where we need to look at it. What do we have a cord here with this? Um, Especially because we're so also empathic around it. But that's a version of a healthy one. Now we can have these cords that can show up within unhealthy relationships, which is what I would say is more common. Family members where we need to put up boundaries, have space between really unhealthy relationships or unhealthy people, um, where we need those boundaries. Cords can be a part of that, that we need to let go of because they don't belong to us. They can also be to places or events or roles. So that can be an aspect of it. They can go into past lives. They can go into ancestral history. All of those things can be a part of it. One of the differences now, one of the most popular ways, let me go back real quick. One of the most popular ways to cut cords is, you're literally cutting it, whether that's through the motion of your hands. One of the popular ways to do it is with a crystal where you're cutting the cord. That's a popular way to do it as well. So you have different varieties of ways to do cord cutting. Reiki actually taught Colleen and myself this um, when we were doing work with this and in even listening around the next step because we were seeing this in our sessions. But then it's like, how do you define what you're experiencing in your sessions? Reiki actually comes in and dissolves the cords rather than cuts the cords. It's not to say that we still don't have the. I've definitely seen it here or there where a cord cutting is necessary. Most popular times is when I've seen it with really unhealthy romantic relationships. But even then, most of the time, it is a level of cord healing. And what Reiki is doing is coming in and enveloping that cord, um, and lifting it into the light. And even just that idea of the dissolving of a cord versus a cutting of a cord, you can kind of see the differences in the energetic aspects of that. One is very abrupt and one is a little more gentle. Both are powerful, both work. It's just a different style in the way that Reiki showed us to do this work. And then if you're talking about a healthy relationship, the cord dissolving or the cord healing is a really beneficial tool in how Reiki does this. And again, you can just have the intention that Reiki comes in and it does this work. Maybe there's some sort of intuitive impression, or maybe even you can hear it in the interview, or for yourself, you can relate to this where you're like, oh, I have maybe this family member, or an ex-friend or an ex relationship that I need to do some healing. So I'm going to have Reiki come in and help dissolve those cords between us. So it's it again, it can just be through intention around it as well. Um so then there is those are the different types of attachments as far as, and now also I want to say that there's even more. These are kind of the main ones that we felt like you hear about when we were talking about this. Like if I'm on YouTube and I'm watching spiritual things, I feel like these are the ones that I hear most about, or on TikTok when people are talking about these kinds of attachments. So it's helpful to know what they are. So we have the cords and connectors that I just talked about. We have spirit attachments around, that have the consciousness um, that can be attached to us. And also, I just want to say too that a lot of times the consciousness of spirit attachments can be very limited. So, um, there is that aspect. We have intrusions that are non-conscious. They don't have a consciousness, but they are an attachment. And then we have the curses, oaths, vows, spells, promises. One of the other words that you might hear a lot is the word extraction. So what does extraction mean? Well, these are the techniques that you use to release uh, these cords and connectors. So there's a lot of different types of extraction work. There's a lot of different tools and techniques of extraction work, of extraction techniques. So again, as we always say, like there's not necessarily a right or a wrong around it. But one thing that we have seen is how Reiki does this work is really, really powerful, but also is one of the more gentle methods of extraction work. So it is the removal, and I would say the transmutation of attachments when you're doing it through Reiki, because it sends it into the light. It's a part of what Reiki energy does is it sends it into the light where it is to be brought back into the light. Even with spirit attachments, um, they are going back into the light with it, rather than needing to. Other techniques might include either, casting the energy out or containing it into something. Crystals is a common way to do that. You're containing it into a crystal. Um, but what Reiki has shown the most is that they, like I don't want to be contained in a crystal for eternity. Let me go into the light. So that's one of the beautiful things about Reiki. Now, that's not to say that this is a wrong way to do it. Also, like um, it is, uh, you know, still, I just don't want to dishonor all of the ways that these different techniques can be done. So that's why I'm just trying to make sure that I am respectful for all of the tools and techniques that are done in spiritual modalities. So, I of course want to always make sure that I'm honoring all the ways that this work is done. But going back into the light and transmuting into the light, so that maybe the energy or the attachment, or maybe it's a lost soul that doesn't know how to get into the light. You can see that especially I've seen it where their belief system is that they, don't know how to get there because of maybe religious wounding. Maybe they believed in this lifetime that they would go into purgatory. Now, I personally don't actually like have that belief system, but it doesn't mean that somebody can't create that for themselves. And so Reiki can come in and show them the pathway to the light. I had one not too long ago that actually the religious wounding was that she didn't believe in the pathway of like how we think of Christianity to get to heaven. And Reiki showed her that, well, that's just one version of what the enlightened realms look like. Reiki was able to show the pathway to get to the light. Um, and so there's that level of bringing it back to the light that can be really helpful. Um, for it and transmuting it and the oaths and curses and vows and spells and promises like let's be in moving into a realm where those things don't need to exist for us, that we can transmute them onto the dual planet, right? So there's that. um you also might hear the term or know the term like psychic surgery. Um, and also other people do this, do auric or aura clearing. Those are techniques to, reorganize the biofield, letting go of the biofield. We might have psychic surgery that is the energetic clearing with our hands and symbols to dissolve congestion, repair the tears in the auric field or the biofield and restore that flow with it. The thing with it all is that we have it's our right to have sovereignty in our bodies. Nothing has the right to attach to us, to um, be within our body. We we have the right. It's kind of like one of the highest laws, right? We have the right to be sovereign in our own energy, in our own bodies. And also, Reiki is the power of love. Consciousness is the core of love. And however you think about that, if it's God or consciousness or source, it is pure love, unconditional love. And that we get to, at the core of us and that key within all of us, or, spiritually guided life force energy that was within all of us, that we get to have the right to be sovereign in our bodies. And that love actually has the highest authority. Light has the highest authority, even if it doesn't feel like that sometimes. That when you are in the dark, a tea light still illuminates the dark. And that's one of the things that Reiki energy does as well, is that Reiki energy illuminates these places and illuminates all of these. And that's also a part of how the transmutation works, is that it's illuminating it. And the other thing about Reiki energy that is so valuable in attachment and extraction work, with Reiki energy, one of the things that it's really shifting. And this is to each of us what we get to be called and how we do this work. But it is bringing this work from a style of light warrior to light bringer. And by bringing in the Reiki energy, we are bringing in the light. And like I said, with that tea light, it is illuminating these spaces and bringing back into the light. So there's no battle involved with it. There's no battle. We don't have to battle it. Now, we might be called to be light warrior, but I can tell you, for me, that is not my path. I'm not warrior energy. I have been that in many past lifetimes, and I am in this past lifetime, or in this lifetime, to shift that within my karmic outline. And so I am not here to be a warrior. With Reiki energy, I don't have to be. It doesn't have to come from me. It can come from Reiki energy. I use spirit guides in this work. So I use the ascended masters to come in and help bring in the light and release these cords and connectors. That's a big way of how we teach to do it. Um, but you don't have to do that. That's why we talk about that Reiki energy is still really effective in this work. And so it comes in, and that authority of the love, that authority of Reiki energy, the authority of the light comes in and envelops it, brings it back into the light again, where that transmutation and that healing is concerned. Um, so that's one of the biggest differences too with how Reiki energy does this work. It's a light bringer versus a light warrior. But I know people that are called to the light warrior style, and that is where you're battling attachments, you're battling those the lower consciousness or those beings that are, in this duality here that get stuck to people. But it's also one of the reasons that we talk about this often enough is because it is a difference in kind of the evolution of how to do this work and Reiki energy teaching around that and showing um, around that. And you can just bring in Reiki energy and it knows where to go and what to do with it. That's one of the things is that I consider myself a light bringer and bringing in the light, which is Reiki energy. It's not my light, it's Reiki energy. I'm bringing in the light to help with this work, to bring the light back to these things, to the attachments, bringing them back into the light where they can do their own healing, where they can do their own healing in the light, which doesn't have anything to do with me or my clients if I'm releasing it from my clients. Um, and um, and transmuting it for time. And most of the time they want to. Like, please, I don't want to be stuck in this form. I want to be in the light. I want to be transmuted back to source consciousness, back to home, back to that light, the enlightened realms, rather than being stuck in this version of whatever that looks like when it comes to a cord and connector. So that's a really big aspect of Reiki and this work when it comes to attachments, when it comes to extractions, when it comes to how to do this work. So I think what we're going to do now is we'll go into the journey where Danny will be leading a guided journey where um, we have the option to do this work for ourselves. Now, one of the things to know is that we don't always have a spirit attachment. So, like, not going into story around having a spirit attachment, right? Some of us do experience that more than others. Um, but if we're going into this, it's not necessarily a an attachment that we have. So, kind of like not making up that we have attachment just for the sake of this journey that we're going to go into. Um, but, usually there's like a cord or connector that we could release to something, an event in our life or somebody or something like that. So we can certainly look at that. And if you don't have any, if you experience like, that you don't have any, that's good too. Just going into that empowerment of you within that and just brightening that light. So I just want to say that with a caveat with the journey as well. We also have our Q&A tomorrow. If you're listening to this on the recording, it will have been passed, but we do have our Q&A tomorrow at 9 a.m., a little different time. So if you have any more questions about these topics, you could always come or email um, in your questions and we can have some space to be able to talk about them tomorrow and what it all means and things like that. So um, I think with that, we'll go ahead and go into the journey.